Hi there for those who can hear me. I This is Machine Pun, and today we're joined with Samuel Spitale, who is the author of How to Win the War on Truth. I'm gonna jump off, and I'm just gonna jump away to a different tab back right now so I can post the link on Blue Sky, and then we can get to talking here. Okay. All right. So hopefully that didn't take too long or wasn't too incredibly awkward. Um, we have a hello from Blue Daisy Baby. Hi, Blue Daisy Baby. So this is Machine Pun. And I'm here today with Samuel Spitale, who wrote a book called How to Win the War on Truth, which was inspired by a time when we were feeling similar things in 2016. You want to tell us a little bit more about what you were saying, like what motivated you writing this book and what your background is?
Sure. So I have a bachelor's and master's in mass communication. And so I'm a storyteller. And around the 2016 election, I found myself having a lot of conversations with friends and family who believe things that were verifiably untrue. And so I kind of became obsessed with how we penetrate, these barriers of belief. How do we help people see that they've been sold these ideas, just like any other consumer good? And so I just kept thinking about it, and then the book kind of came out of that. And the answer is not just it's not just one thing. It's like a lot of things. Part of the problem is media literacy. We don't always distinguish between advertising versus public relations versus journalism. In social media and the digital landscape, they all just kind of blend, and we don't know what's what. And so media literacy is one of the problems, especially with older generations. The younger ones who have grown up online are a little better often at seeing what's real and what's not. But for the older generation, not as much, because it's a newer tool for them. Excuse me. So media literacy is a part of the problem. Another part of the problem is our cognitive biases and how we're resistant to being corrected. We seek confirmation bias, and we can be emotionally manipulated with fake news or false stories that tap into these unconscious biases, especially when they're directed at like out groups, people that are not like us, whether that's immigrants or trans people or any other minority. And so becoming self-aware of our own biases, as well as emotional awareness when bad actors up to no good want to tap into our negative emotions, because hate someone or have a grievance about something, as opposed to appealing to our better natures. And so
can I ask you a question on that? Because I think that is, I appreciate the way you framed that. And like I think it's easy to talk about what they do and not what we do when it comes to biases. And one thing I think about with the word bias is I think that people there's kind of an anti-bias bias, if you will. That you know, like there's a sense that some people think that a lack of bias means not in the middle, or that bias means to be in the middle, and then if it's in the middle, then it's a lack of bias. But like, you know, like you take an issue that most people would not disagree with, like slavery. Like most of us are just against slavery. We don't have an anti-slavery bias. We're not like okay with some slavery. Like slavery is bad always. And um, you know, so like I think sometimes we look at bias as you if you have an informed opinion about something, then it's a bias. But there's a difference between having an
Yeah.
informed opinion and a bias. A bias is an unfair opinion. It's you frame the opinion without any information, without any rational thought, and so that you just think that, and then you build your library of understanding on that. So, how do you protect yourself from bias without sacrificing actual informed opinions?
Yeah, I think what you said, excuse me, what you said is completely accurate. A lot of times, information, um, information, information is delivered. The groups that do not benefit from that information, um, reframe that as some sort of bias. Like I have a liberal bias. It's like, well, no, I'm just quoting science. Like, so I think that is indeed a problem. Um, but you know, actual bias is a lot of it is often tied to our identity. So, you know, I have in the book I have like a worksheet. So when you think of everything that defines you or everything you identify as, so whether that's male, Caucasian, you know, Catholic, an issue alone like me, um, all of these things that are part of our identity, we are biased toward. So recognizing how we're often biased in favor of people in our in groups means that we're often susceptible to being influenced to be biased against the out groups. So if I'm Catholic, then I could very easily have a bias toward other religions, for instance. And so political strategists or people that want to divide us are really good at appealing to those biases that are ruining our identity without us realizing it. So, for
There's
instance, one of the ones I talk about. Oh, go ahead.
that just there's a like I became sort of aware of those things. I had a friend, a black friend, back in the '90s, and he was the first person I ever really had at length discussion issues with things about race. And one day I said to him, he said something about I'm a black man. That's who I am. And I said, well, see, that's your problem. I'm just a man. And he said, um, but you're allowed to be. And that, you know, like, and I realized that there's a lot more that goes into it. Like if you're black in society, you are constantly reminded you're black. If you're white in our society, you're not constantly reminded that you're white. Like even if you have like 5% of people are racist, you know, um, and you talk to 20 people a day and you're a black man, you're going to talk to somebody racist almost every single day, even though 95% of the people, you know, maybe aren't. So you're the way that you interact with society, your identity is going to form differently if you're a black person or a white person. That has nothing to do with you, but actually everything to do with the society around you. So anyway, I just that when you say unconscious bias, like there, I think that frames a lot of thinking for a lot of white people that they're like, I don't hate black people. Why are you saying I'm a racist? And it's not even saying you're a racist or whatever, but there's just an unawareness of race and how it can affect other people.
Absolutely. That's what they call implicit bias. And it's an unconscious bias, but it is rampant, whether we, identify it or not. So I have some stats in the book, like I'm looking at the excerpt right here. So a study of 310 health systems found that 90% of doctors prescribed lower doses of pain relief to black patients than white patients. Or if a white candidate and a black candidate have identical resumes and they submit them for a job, the white candidates are far more likely to get a call back than the black candidates. It's like those types of statistics repeat all through society, whether it's black people, cops stop and frisking black people versus white people, unarmed black people getting killed more than whites. So, we all have that unconscious bias,
and that
we just often fail to realize.
And that affects how we interpret new information, how we learn,
yes,
what kind of media we receive. So
absolutely, those biases influence everything. And so, DEI, there are a lot of attacks on DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. But the purpose of diversity, equity, inclusion is to try to compensate for all of this unconscious implicit bias that's rampant everywhere. So, if we didn't have, say, a DEI candidate, or then we might not have any black person in that office, because white people tend to hire white people. So sometimes we need a reminder, so it's a way to level the playing field and create equity. And so the attacks on DEI originate with people that know what they're doing. It's not hard to understand why DEI exists, but when people want to claim colorblindness and everyone's equal, like, you're ignoring science. The data suggests strongly otherwise. And that's what we've been witnessing the last few years, is an attack against any measure to try to create equity across the board. But there are what's called a dog whistle. Dog whistles kind of came about after the civil rights movement. So before the civil rights movement, politicians would regularly campaign on a racial platform. The N-word, they would say, oh no, the N-words are gonna, take your jobs, and all the usual fear mongering, whatever it is. Segregation, they would all run on that. But after the civil rights movement, things started to change. Black people now had equality, equal access to government programs. So political strategists like Lee Atwater defined more subtle ways of implying race and blackness without saying those words. And so, urban became a code word, forced busing became a code word, welfare queens became a code word. All of these things that subtly suggest minorities without being on the nose. And so a lot of our beliefs, come out of this. The welfare queen's a prime example, and I talk about that a lot in my book. Like, there really
welfare
aren't any
queen with the Louis Vuitton bag. There's always got to be the Louis Vuitton bag with it for some reason.
Right. But she was like the person that they used as the example of a welfare queen. Welfare was the least of her crimes. Like, she may have murdered people. She kidnapped children. She was crazy, but they ignored all of these more severe crimes because they were trying to sell the idea that Black people were mooching off the welfare system. And that image was created only after Black people now had access to these programs. So as a way maintain the racial order and fight the equality of the civil rights era, they started demonizing programs that Black people now had access to, and welfare was one of them. And so much of our beliefs, especially political beliefs or social beliefs, have been, manufactured to manipulate people in a certain way, and it's been happening for so long. We just take these things, for granted. We take them as a truism when they're really just a myth. And so identity is a huge part of it. We can think of identity almost like, which I refer to in the book, more like target marketing. Like you can't sell every product to everyone. You're selling Barbie dolls, you're not advertising to boys, right? You're advertising to little girls. So political propaganda works the same way. Who is your target market? And if it's white people, how do you divide them and split them from the rest of the market? And that's appealing to race in a lot of subtle ways. Immigration is another huge dossal, really. All immigration, like you look at the history of immigration, and America always hating immigrants. It's just the immigrant changes over the years,
Right,
but
right.
the language does not. So they're taking our jobs, they're bringing crime, like all of that shit is just it's all recycled, and it has been applied to all immigrants: Irish, Catholic, Jews, Muslims. These days it's Latinos, but every time
the Irish name Nina. Have you ever heard of the name Nina? Back in like around this, like in the 1800s, early 1800s, they would write "No Irish need apply" on the on job openings.
Right.
And so then they took that and they made it into a name, Nina, Nina. So
no, I hadn't heard that, but I actually have a "No Irish need apply" graphic in the book for when I talk about this stuff. But with immigration, it serves as a dog whistle. So you're tapping into that unconscious racial bias against people of color that might be immigrating. So you could very well be concerned about immigration or immigration as a problem, but it almost doesn't matter because it's still serving the same purpose. So whether it's a white supremacist not wanting any people of color in this country, or you're just concerned about immigrant crime, the result's the same. And that should be the first indicator that maybe you've been manipulated a little bit. Because again, the result's the same. So with immigration, there's the fear of crime and all that, which is all BS. Immigrants commit lower crime rates than almost any other demographic in a population. Right. And like, why would they commit if they risk their lives and travel 2,000 miles? Why would you commit a crime just to get kicked out of the country? Like it's so counterintuitive. But the people that are receiving that message don't think about that. But because again, the unconscious biases are reacting, and we're not really thinking critically. And the other part of that, when I mentioned emotional awareness earlier, this is where emotional awareness can really come in. So emotional awareness is definitely something people that spend a lot of time in psychology or psychiatric offices are very good at, and something artists work in. But understanding which emotions they're trying to tap into can reveal a lot about the message and its intent. So if media messages that want to make us angry at a group, want to make us hateful of a group, want to make us fearful of a group, those are pretty much all signs we're being manipulated.
Are negative, is it easier to manipulate people with negative?
Yes, it's called a negativity bias. Absolutely. A negative emotion is like 7 times, stronger than like a positive emotion or something like that. And so because negative emotions tap into our fight or flight response, which is an evolutionary hardwiring that makes us either fight or flee. So If you can tap into that with, like, say, immigrants are causing crime, then you you fail to critical think. Excuse me. You fail to critical think. The emotion is a shortcut, and
Mm.
that's why negative political ads and so much fear mongering appeals to negative emotions. That's why
So
everything
like
on Fox
the
News.
famous, probably the best political line, like just from a purely objective, like not in terms of endorsing the message, but the whole, you know, he's not for us, he's for they them. So like they had that in a lot of referring, like they'd be talk about how Colin Allred wanted trans people to, you know, have gay rights drag shows on military bases or whatever. You know, most of
Right.
it wasn't true, but they'd say, you know, he's not for us, he's for they them, and so then that's, you know, oh, you know, they're gonna mutilate your kids, your child's gonna come home, you know, your son's gonna come home as your daughter, and your daughter's gonna come home as your son, and
Right.
you're not gonna have any
All
say in
fear
it, and blah blah
mongering,
blah.
and none of it's based in reality. So, right, trans. So, I mean, gay people make up a very small percentage of the population to begin with. Trans people make up an even smaller percentage. Like, don't quote me, but it's something like 0.2% of the population. Something
Oh, yeah.
extremely
And
small.
most of them, there were actually at one point, I think that it's probably still true. There were more laws against trans people in sports than there were trans people in sports.
Yeah, I mean, there have probably never been more than what, a dozen trans people in a sport like in
Yeah.
history. It is an extremely small number. And so people fighting for trans rights are simply trying to achieve the same rights that the rest of us already have. And everything else beside, out of that conversation is fear mongering and hate directed to divide people. And they do it because it drives people to the voting booth, to support, candidates that um, probably have policies that we would not support otherwise. So these cultural issues are a way to emotionally manipulate people, to motivate them to vote for someone who may likely be up to no good. Um, and so in trans issues, that's like such a great example. The majority of Americans have never met a trans person. They probably never will. This will not affect them or their kids in any way whatsoever. But if you scare people into thinking it's bigger than it is, they've successfully manipulated that voter. And so
So
emotional awareness is very important, especially when it comes to politics. Because
there's Mahogany Woe left a comment here. It's embarrassing to Americans to hold these lies as factual. And while you're talking, I keep thinking about, there's this idiom that's attributed to Mark Twain, but it's not really him that said it, but I think it's still a great idiom. It's easier to fool someone than to convince them that they've been fooled. And
absolutely,
I
because
think
our cognitive
is that
biases.
based on what you're saying, like, oh, but they're gonna come take my, they're gonna turn my kid into a trans, or my, some trans guy is gonna get my daughter kicked off the team because, he's, and they're just going to be these people that are pretending to be girls so that they can, like all of that fear mongering is
Yeah,
easy to convince them, and then it's harder to convince them that no, people aren't going to pretend to be trans so that your daughter doesn't make the volleyball team. Like,
right. It's not a thing. But right, we have, our cognitive system is designed, basically to reject information that conflicts with our worldview because we want to feel secure. And if we start allowing some of our beliefs to be corrected, then it means that we have to admit we've been wrong, or that we've been misled, or that we've been suckered, and that it opens the door for lots of other beliefs. And so, excuse me. So, we often have, our brain has these measures that kind of keep the reality at bay if it threatens our sense of identity or self or our worldview, which is very unfortunate. So it takes a lot of courage and a strong sense of security to admit when we've been wrong or accept new information that conflicts our belief. And it's often not until it stares us in the face and we have no choice but to admit it. The other thing I was going to say a second ago about political ads and people that are running, if you are proposing solutions to domestic policy problems, you don't have to appeal to negative emotions. So I like to think of Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders for the most part. When they run or they campaign, everything out of their mouths is a solution. I want to tax this, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do that. They don't have to run on the problem because they have solutions. So people that do not have solutions have to just cash in on that problem. And so immigration is a perfect one. And so always beware when a politician is running on the problem and not a solution, because solutions are positive. They're attempts to solve something. But if somebody's just, making you fearful of trans people or immigrants or whatever, then they probably don't have a real problem, a real solution. And if they do, it's probably not a good one. Anyway.
Like, I think in this last election, I think inflation is a great example. Republicans would never shut up about inflation, but they never say a damn thing that they could do about it.
Exactly. And they're not going to do anything about it because inflation benefits their constituents, which is corporate America. So yes, inflation sucks. Inflation is a problem, but tariff causes inflation. Corporate greed causes inflation. Extra money in the pockets of poor people does not cause inflation. The data is just not there. So tariffs, price markups, to me, are one of the biggest drivers in corporate greed. The answer to everything is almost corporate greed or racism. Right? It's when you peel back the layers enough, it's always those two things. So like price markups, the difference between what it costs to make something and then what it's selling for, used to be before 1980 like 20 or 30% above cost, and now it's as much as 7% as of like 2023. So things are costing a lot more because corporations are making a lot more. I think corporations now have the highest profit margins in like 70 years. So while inflation was a natural byproduct of the pandemic, supply chains were disrupted, the world shut down. There were a lot of issues that caused it at first, especially. But now the majority of it is greedflation, what economists call greedflation, which are corporations taking advantage of it.
Like, I agree with you, and I think there were some other issues too. Like, there was the supply chain things, and then there was just some like the bird flu, or there was a number like
right. And the war in Ukraine.
Anybody that says there is a reason for inflation is wrong. Like, there were multiple reasons for inflation, but one thing that the Republicans talked about a lot was it's all the money they were printing up that caused it, which I think is a bogus thing, because that does not, like, if you print up $22 trillion, it does not add $2 trillion to the economy. It just changes the percent of the money that's available that's cash backed. And they were only printing it up because they had the run on the bank, and they wanted, there were concerns about not having enough cash available if there was a run on the bank, and so on and so forth. So it maybe caused like a tiny part of the inflation, but for the most part, like if they give another $10,000 or $100,000 or whatever to a bank, and then you go out and you take out $100 from your bank account, and it's that new printed up money, you still have to take that $100 out of your bank account. It's not changing how much money the bank has or you have. But the reason I'm bringing it up is that they have their facts that they don't think through, they don't process, they don't validate. And this is what you always end up running into when you're debating a MAGA, is that they have the thing Fox News told them, and then there's reality. and they think you're the one that's an idiot, even though they're just regurgitating bad logic, bad information. But how do you talk to them to where they can hear you? Do you need to, like you were mentioning, there's something they're afraid, and that's why they believe the things they do? Do you have to find a safe place for them? And I don't mean that in a sarcastic way, but like, do you need to make them like calm enough to hear, or is like, is that possible? Like, how do you communicate with a MAGA in this world? That's what I'm asking.
Right. Well, before I answer that one, I also want to mention one other thing for inflation. Monopoly power is also a huge reason that things are so expensive, because the corporations that gobbled up each other to such an extent that monopoly power is, it's highly concentrated. And so if you really want to protect jobs, job growth, and all of these things, you need to break up the biggest corporations. Because the more power they have, the more they price gouge, the more they run competitors out of business. Like with Walgreens and CVS, one of them bought up the other one just to close them all, so that you have to go to the only one remaining.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're the only one remaining, then they don't have to stock. They don't have to keep the employee. They don't have to keep employees. They can raise prices because there's no competition. So competition is a huge part of that. So for the other part, for your question, yes, it's so not an easy answer, but I think there are two categories of Trump voters or people misinformed. Or rather, I think one of the categories is the misinformed person, like the one you
Mm-hmm.
just said. And then I think other just low information voters who don't really, they don't really have any of the information. They just hear, crap and conversation on TV. So it's clearly easier to reason with the low information voter. And I already see a lot of talk on social media about how these people, some of them anyway, are already having buyer's remorse. Now they're
Mm-hmm.
Googling tariffs and what it means. Now they're understanding that the candidate that they voted for is not the candidate that had solutions to their problems. Now they're
Yeah.
understanding that striking down Obamacare means striking down the Affordable Care Act. But they've been so indoctrinated into hating Obama, again, dog whistle, thinly veiled racism, that they didn't realize Obamacare and Affordable Care are the same things.
I had an actual debate with somebody for like 30 minutes where he was saying he doesn't have to worry about if this was, back in Trump's first term. He was talking about he doesn't have to worry if they take away Obamacare because he had the Affordable Care Act. Like he had his insurance through ACA. So he didn't have to worry about if they struck down Obamacare. Like they've even disassociated, like they anyway, it took him like
Yeah.
half an hour to be convinced that those were the same thing.
Well, and that's a product of the information silo and the media that lie and demonize and hate, and they've just been kind of brainwashed to reject Obamacare without understanding anything about it. And so, I do blame the partisan media and the people up to no good. But yes, it's so discouraging. But people are realizing some of this. The low information voters, there were all these undocumented immigrants who voted for Trump, who now realize that their parents could be deported, or
Mm-hmm.
their families could be broken up. And so I feel like the low information voters will realize it sooner than later. Um, for the misinformed, that's a lot harder. And, I think you have to come in on common ground, but you have to, talk about policies that they voted for or they think they voted for, and try to help them understand how the issue is actually going to be addressed or ignored, under the new administration. So if protecting Social Security is important to them if they're old and they live off Social Security, then it's very helpful to inform them that, well, the policy agenda of the new administration is to cut Social Security. So, coming into them with the issues they care about. And I think helping them to understand the parts of Project 2025 that will impact them the most may be a good way to get through, because 2025 is very well laid out. It is a very in-depth blueprint. And if they're not familiar with it, then it's time to get familiar with it, because it's coming. And helping them understand the parts of that. And, like my mom would be like, well, they couldn't touch Social Security or they wouldn't do that, just like assuming the status quo would remain the status quo. And, helping them understand that, yeah, but cutting or Social Security is not benefiting them. These are white people.
Right.
They would rather cut your Social Security so they could have tax cuts. They don't care if it makes you poor, because the only party that cares about poor people just lost. And even then,
say, we're not cutting Social Security. We're just raising the retirement age. Like their payments aren't.
Yeah.
As though like an extra 2 years of your life is not actually cutting Social Security. Like you've got to spend 2 more years of your life working. That's a cut to Social Security. I don't care if you're
and disability. They're already. There's something about, cutting benefits. But helping them, understand these things, because everyone is going to be affected by the Project 2025 stuff. And, one of the most important things to realize is tax cuts for the wealthy corporations, especially when they're not needed, means cuts to everything that helps poor people. So whether that's education, the ADA, the justice system, it's all the same. It is all things society needs to function properly. And the poorer you are, the more you're going to be hurt by these things. The more tariffs are going to eat into your pocketbook. The more healthcare is going to be reduced. And so many of our societal problems already exist because of these neoliberal policies pushed by conservatives that cut things that would give people a leg up and make society more equal. And that's why we have so much inequality already, because the wealthiest among us have basically removed themselves from paying taxes. Corporate tax rate, excuse me, the corporate tax rate, is like at an all-time low. And all that means is that's more money going into the hands of oligarchs. That's more monopoly power. And the more money they pocket, then the less money that goes into programs that provide a leg up, like college education or welfare, whatever you have. And they just use that to attain more wealth and power. And so, I feel like that's one of the more important things. And so for the inequality, I'm not taking up for the Democrats by any means, because as much as they have done in the last 4 years, there still has not been enough to address broad inequality. That is not going to happen until you break up corporations, which would create more jobs, and then also more competition, which would lower prices. You need to raise the minimum wage. You need to fund education and either make it free. To me, you would make healthcare free. Things that other democracies already do. But we pretend that it's socialism or communism or it's a foreign idea. And it's not a foreign idea. Every other country does it. And so the fact that most Americans don't know that is a testament to how ill-informed we are and how poor of a job the people that are pushing for those things has done in communicating that everybody has already done this, and the only reason we haven't is corporate power, really. Who really stands to lose if we make healthcare free? Only for-profit health insurance companies. And healthcare is an industry that should never have a profit margin to begin with. And other countries realize that, but we didn't care.
Mm.
Again, greed often wins out. Capitalism often wins out at the expense of democracy in this country. And so most of these problems originated because we cared more about, healthcare companies making money than we did about providing healthcare for citizens. And I feel like, helping people see these issues in those terms.
So
who
when
benefits
you're
by me
talking
believing
about,
whatever?
when you're talking about helping people see this, are you talking, like, you're not talking about like debating somebody on Twitter, right? You're not talking about it.
No.
Are you talking about somebody you work with? Are you talking about family members? Are you talking about a conversation you can have at Thanksgiving dinner? Like, how do you
Yes.
how do you broach the conversation to where it's receptive? Like my MAGA brother-in-law, if you ever try to talk to him, he's the only one that does any talking. And you just wait for him to exhaust himself like a puppy humping your leg. But no matter how much he humps, he just never gets tired. And so, like, how do you have an actual conversation with somebody to where you can say things that they listen to?
Well, yeah, most of this I'm talking about low information voters who may not have those cemented beliefs already. Because yes, if these beliefs have been cemented through indoctrination from right-wing media, then you're probably not going to get through to them, because it's like arguing against their religion. It's never going to happen. So those beliefs are so cemented. And so those are difficult conversations to have, and it ends up just driving you crazy. And believe me, I have plenty of those people in my life. For the low information, yes, I'm talking about finding the common ground, helping them see. For those, for the misinformed, it's really more about, if you can find an issue where they may be, there's a wedge, you can plant a seed, then I think it's worth having those conversations.
And how do you go about it? Are you like Socratic, you just ask them questions? And because I appreciate what you were saying earlier, that the dangerous politicians are the ones that don't offer solutions. So like would a strategy be to be, well, what's he going to do about that? Like I appreciate inflation's a problem. What's Trump going to do about that? And then watch them sputter for an answer. Like,
yeah, well, so there's a group I'll share with you guys called Smart Politics, and their website is Join Smart. And so it is a psychiatrist, I think, that runs it, but it's about trying to have these delicate situations. And so I don't have thing right now to see if I have any of the, where did you go? Oh, there you are. Okay. I'm looking right now to see if I have any of their suggestions, but they kind of have like a blueprint for how to have these conversations. And so it kind of starts with like, finding common ground, validating their concerns. Oh, I hear you. You're worried about, you're worried about the debt. Like, oh yeah, what is a lot? And then so you're validating their concerns, echoing back what they said, and then, slowly kind of coming around like, well, yeah, I'm worried about the debt too. So, why do you think if our politicians are worried about the debt, then why do you think they kept giving tax cuts to people who need them when that just grows the debt? Or, trying to approach it in a way that leaves it more open-ended and that plants a seed. And I don't have their blueprint in front of me, but there's kind of like a bulleted list. And they practice having these conversations with people. So I would encourage anybody listening to check out Smart Politics. And it's supposedly conversation work.
Is that with an S or?
Smart Politics with an S, and their website is joinsmart.org.
Joinsmart.org.
Smart.org. Yep. Oh, I can post it in the chat.
Okay.
So yeah, and it's, because each person's going to be different, and you're often not going to win them over with facts. One of the other things I like to help people think about is, for any belief, ask who benefits by me believing this. So whatever that belief is. So if it's, like, oh, global warming is a hoax. Well, who benefits by us believing that? Like, isn't it weird that the only person that benefits by that is the oil and gas industry? Like, why wouldn't you want to, save the planet or switch to electric vehicles or do all these other things that, even if climate change isn't real, are still good things for society? So, why is it that the only person that seeks to lose with climate regulation is the oil and gas industry? They're the only ones who benefit by this belief. So, if the only person benefiting by belief is wealth and power, then, chances are that belief may have been sold to us. And
Right.
so, whether or not that's helpful for people that are all, entrenched in their beliefs, maybe not. But for people that, are just low informed or hadn't thought about it, that could be something eye-opening to consider.
So, how do I, like, I think that maybe some of us have been scarred and just want to, like, we're like, there's no point.
Yeah,
and we're
I
just
feel the same way,
we're
Dave.
exhausted, we're argued out, we're, and it's just like, what is even the point of trying to talk to them anymore? How would you respond to that?
Yeah. Well, I've been seeing a lot of posts about how, we really have to resist that urge. And believe me, I'm filled with that urge every day. Because, the next few years are going to be extremely challenging. And some people will start waking up. And so we need to be there when the first crack in that wall happens. And as these things start affecting them in ways they did not foresee, to help them understand what it is. And so, I saw something about, we need to look at the people that believe all the BS as victims, which, to a degree they are, because, the real blame holders are the people that spread the lies. The way the algorithms work, the way our biases work, the people that believe the lies often, some of them may not care and they're just, full of hate or whatever, or grievance, but a lot of them have just simply been misled by years of BS. And so as society starts to change and worsen, and civility worsens, we need to be there to, help tear down the indoctrination once the cracks appear. And I don't know if that's something that's going to happen soon, but for the low information voters, it could be. I've been seeing a lot of stories about people cutting out MAGA people from their lives and how much harm it's doing, especially with the holiday season coming up. And so, all these people on TikTok in tears that their sisters won't speak to them or their mother won't speak to them or whatever.
Or Jesse Waters. Did you hear about Jesse Waters? His mom told him he can't come over for Thanksgiving.
Wow. Yeah. So, well, and so, but these are people that are important, obviously, because they're family. And if they're taking such drastic measures, I think it's important for the person, cutting them off or distancing, to explain to them. And a lot of it has been around women's reproductive freedom,
Yeah.
and helping the male or the husband or even another female explain why. Like, you voted for Trump. To me, be honest and saying, to me, that means that you're okay with me dying in a miscarriage,
Yeah.
or you're okay with them overturning gay marriage, and I lose my civil protections. Like, so coming to it on the personal terms, and so that they understand how the person is feeling, which again is a tough conversation. It's have these conversations. It's so much easier just to cut people out. But if people who are devastated because they're uninvited to Thanksgiving dinner, I think it's important for them to understand why, and that starts with the human level and understanding how you personally are affected. And it's likely because they didn't even consider that or didn't think about that, or
Mm-hmm.
often is the case. And I expect to see a lot more of that on social media in the next few days, or the coming weeks, months, years. And so I think it's going to be a long, hard wake-up call for some of these people. The ones
And
I
I think
worry about
there
the
was a lot of reaction too, just from like people that were, oh, we're losing our Christmas bonus because we have to, the companies got to brace for the tariffs and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Like, I think a lot of MAGAs that did not ask the questions beforehand are now asking them, and it's too late. That might be
yeah,
ones like they're like, well, okay, but I still voted the right way. But like that might be like the crack that you were referencing earlier.
yeah. Anything
There
that
might
affects
be
someone personally, because it's especially on the right, it's very common for people to not consider these policies or things until it affects you personally. Whereas the left is a little more, they're trying to help less fortunate oftentimes with policies, whether it's protecting someone's civil rights or funding education or whatever, what have you. And on the right, as we've seen with a lot of Republican politicians, they don't support gay marriage until they have a gay kid. And then all of a sudden, or whatever it is, until it affects them personally, they don't have empathy for the people suffering from a problem.
And so, like one
And so
listener, I
as
don't know if you can see the comments here, but there was one listener that is asking, shouldn't we talk to those closest to us? And like, is
yeah,
that
we should.
would that be like the ones that are most receptive to us are going to be the ones that are close to us, the ones that
Yes, especially, but finding the common ground with how, again, these things are affecting you personally or will affect them personally, and
mhm,
understanding what that means and how you feel, and helping them to see that.
mhm,
Um, and if they're, if they can't experience it personally themselves, like if it's a husband instead of a wife, for instance, talking about abortion rights, then they need to understand how it affects you. And so the next closest thing to having empathy for, someone like yourself is someone you care about. And so, yeah, I think we're all going to have these conversations over the next few years. And the ones that are going to be the toughest are the ones who, what I worry about the communication angle is that even as things get horrible, and rights are overturned and internment camps are housing documented immigrants, and that people will still refuse to wake up
mhm.
because the media ecosystem they live in is still going to continue to lie to them. And to me, those are the ones that are scary. The
Mhm.
ones in the true believer in Hitler's Germany. You had plenty of people that were starting to wake up and like, I got to get the hell out of here. This is horrible. But then the other ones, cognitive dissonance just, it never got through. They never could accept. Um, they bring this about, or that they were on the wrong side of an issue. And those are the ones I'm more fearful for, because those are the true believers that are going to be on a crusade.
So there's like some that are just gonna, when the leopard starts eating their face, they'll come around. There are others that even
yes,
as the leopard eats their face, they'll just blame Joe Biden or whatever.
exactly, or Obama, or Hillary
That
Clinton, or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, because the media ecosystem they live in will keep reinforcing that message. Though it'll be interesting to see how they spin it when Republicans have control of everything.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know,
and everything is a
who
direct
were they
result
to
of what
what?
the Republicans did. But you know, never underestimate Fox News's capacity to lie.
Yeah. Well, and you know, then what they'll probably do is justify and rationalize. Like, you know, instead of appealing to someone's humanity that's improperly in an internment camp, they'll just convince us that no, they really are bad people. Or so if they don't have someone to blame, then they will just smear or play the victim or what have you. And so that's, you know, that's the thing that I feel like I'm more worried about understanding censorship and all this, and all the
So
lies
would you
that
like,
already proliferate.
if it's somebody like that, like when we're talking about trying to change minds, is it worth it? Do we need to have some sort of a sorting process to where like this person is, nothing I could ever say to him is ever going to get through. So all I'm doing is I'm wasting my limited amount of energy and patience and just love for my fellow human. Like, it's exhausting. This one person is exhausting me, and I could talk to 5 other people and maybe get somewhere, or I can spend everything on him and not get anywhere. Like, do we need to triage
Yeah,
who we talk to?
I just don't engage with the most ardent believers, especially if you know, they're super set in their ways. You know, oftentimes younger people are people that may not have fully formed beliefs, may be easier to reach. But you know, if it's a 60, 70-year-old person who has subscribed to welfare queens and, you know, racist beliefs their entire lives, they are probably not going to have a mea culpa at age 80. And so, yeah, I think those are going to be extremely hard to reach. I think, you know, you have to pick and choose the battles, because it's, yeah, it's just going to wear you out. Like, but it's important to try. I just, you know, if they drive you crazy or infuriate you, then yeah, I don't know if it's worth it. And in the short term, for right now, I think it's more than most people can handle. So I think, you know, a lot of people just need to continue grieving and rebuilding, you know, their inner peace, and before they fight again. But yeah, and then, you know, and you know, my book offers some strategies, but I feel like, you know, what the book does, or what I try to do, is help understand why people believe all the BS. And so not just they're misinformed or it's a lie, but all of the social structures that work to keep them misinformed. And, you know, and like I said before, that's a lack of media literacy. It's a lack of emotional awareness and understanding of psychology and our biases. It's also a failure to understand, you know, power structures, the people that benefit, the people that are selling this. And then it's also, you know, understanding like logical fallacies and arguments, you know, and recognizing ad hominem attacks and straw man arguments, and, you know, all of these other things that make people sound like they've won an argument but really have no argument. And so just, you know, understanding all of these things and recognizing them when you see them, and I think that will also help give you more insight into, you know, which one of these things is it that's really holding the person you want to get through to back. You know, what the false belief is almost less about the belief and more about why does this person choose to believe that, You know, what
Mm.
understanding of the world do they have, or what bias do they have that this belief provides, an answer or comfort or whatever to, and trying to understand that, uh, will help trying to figure out how to, maneuver the conversation to help them understand stuff.
So, like,
Um,
instead of trying to debate with them about, you know, undocumented workers and whether, they're good or bad or whatever, try to understand like, what are you actually worried about? Like, why are you worried about undocumented workers? Did they steal your cow milking job? Like, did they, but like, what is the underlying motivation? And then speak to that. Is that what you're saying? Rather than sit there and
yes.
just give them statistics about undocumented workers and so
Yeah.
on.
I mean, because the data often doesn't matter. So it's understanding, what are their biases? What is their need to believe this? And so when it comes to immigrants, a lot of times it is racism. Or maybe it's a misbelief that they're stealing their jobs, when that's usually not the case. The immigrants are performing the jobs that pay sub-minimum wage, that employers can pay under the table. And that's why they frequently migrate back and forth for harvest work. They're not stealing our jobs.
Mm.
So why is it that they believe that? And is it because the person's job, has lost plenty of jobs in his life, or is finding it harder to have a job, which a lot of people are, because there are fewer jobs than there used to be, because we keep letting corporations buy each other. And the more they buy each other, the more layoffs, the more businesses are pushed out, the more small businesses are closed. And so, if that's what they're struggling with, then they need to understand the real causes of why they don't have a job. And the blame is never with the most powerless people in society.
Yeah. I always,
The blame is
whenever I
always
think about this, I always think, like, Happy Days is like one of those shows that's supposed to be emblematic of perfect America and everything. And you just realize Howard Cunningham would not exist today. Like, he would be just another dude at Walmart. He would be the guy, like, there's no, the guy that owns and operates the local hardware store now works at Walmart. Like, because
yeah,
Walmart put him out of
yeah,
business.
because they're a powerful conglomerate. And speaking of, there's been a lot of articles in the past few years about The Simpsons, and about how, when The Simpsons came out, the family situation for Simpsons is realistic, and it's not anymore. And I would say, for anybody that watches The Simpsons or likes The Simpsons, there was a brilliant episode a year ago where Robert Reich, the economist, has a cameo, and the entire episode is a 20-minute lesson in
Mm.
how the economics in this country have changed in the last 40 years. And it's brilliantly done. But basically, Bart realizes that he can't have the same life Homer has. And Jan sings it all in a song, and Robert Reich is there to explain it. And it is brilliant. It is finding and watching, because it is a very accurate explanation for why the economic situation is so bad, for so many of us. Why we don't earn much, because all the gains go to the top. Yeah. So I highly recommend it if no one has seen that. And Robert Reich is also worth following on social media if anybody does, because he's had his pulse on the problem for a long time now.
Okay, I think, is it the Dad Feelings episode? That Dad Feelings Limited? Is that?
I feel like it was the season finale, maybe 2 years ago. I don't know. I don't remember the name.
This is season 32, episode 11. I just Googled Robert Reich
Let's see.
episode.
And Hugh Jackman. Let's see. Musical Simpsons cameo with Robert Reich.
Oh, Poorhouse Rock? That must be it.
That's probably it. Poorhouse Rock.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
season 2,
Yeah,
episode, season 33, episode 22. I think those are all
yeah.
available on Max too, right?
They are that maybe Disney Plus. I'm not sure where the
One of
Simpsons
them.
live these days. But yeah, season 33, episode 22, Poorhouse Rocks. It's a great episode to help people understand, stuff in a fun way. But
Okay, I posted that on the YouTube link, but I can't post to the Twitter link from here. But sorry, Mahogany, I see you posting a lot, but I can't reply to you because you're on Twitter without interrupting. But anyway, I appreciate all your commentary here. So anyway, now
yeah, I
I
see.
for the guest's sake, I try to keep these to an hour. But if you want to keep going, that's fine. If you need to go
We can
somewhere,
chat a
that's
few more
fine too.
minutes.
Okay.
I do see one of the questions about why Republicans promoting unpublic schools. Yeah, there are a few reasons. Again, the way to understand the right wing, and well, when it's not fueled by MAGA extremists, is that there are 4 policies that benefit healthy corporations for the most part. I'm not sure if many people know the origin of the terms left and right, but it goes back to like the French Revolution, or when the country was facing an economic crisis, whichever King Louis assembled to discuss how to handle the problem. And on the right was the church, the feudal lords, the aristocrats, basically the only one in society that had money. And on the left was everyone else, the laborers, the craftsmen, the 99%, if you will. And so that is still the definition of left and right for the most part. The left is concerned with equality under the law, and right is concerned with maintaining power and resisting the efforts to distribute power more evenly. So, we don't look at politics that way, but that's kind of what it is. If you look at the voting record, that's what it always is. So, if we think of education that way, then what do they want? They want everybody in private school, so private corporations can make money. They don't want an educated populace, because the more educated you are, the more likely you are to vote left, because you understand how, the hierarchies, and you see how systems work. And, if you're a scientist, you understand the world in a way that is not based on faith and belief. It's more critical thinking. And so that's why the right always attacks the education system. So it's a way to maintain power. And then it's also a way to drive money into private hands. So privatizing any government entity, that's what happens. Like healthcare did not used to necessarily be privatized to the way it is today. That was a conscious decision by the Reagan administration to push out nonprofit HMOs and to make this a for-profit industry. Why? Because that's, money. It wasn't about making society equal or the public good. It was about private wealth. So, it's helpful to look at most policy positions through that lens, which is to help the public good and which is going to drive private wealth for a select few. And that often gives us the answer, what side of the issue we should probably be on. Let's see, is there any, yeah. I was going to say, the other thing about religion, yeah, for the most part, there's a lot of Christian nationalism talk at the moment between the Supreme Court and there are a lot of really great books about, Christian nationalists basically want a nationalized religion, want to erase the line between church and state. And I think we're going to see a lot of those types of policies, especially if Vance becomes president, if something happens to Trump. And that Christian view of the world is very much like the corporate view. It's about power. It's about which groups have power and which groups don't. So you could think of white supremacy, Christian nationalism, corporatocracy. These are all rightward positions to maintain power in the hands of a white male patriarchy, kind of. Which sounds a little hippy dippy, but that's kind of the truth. It's about power. It's about the hierarchy that God intended. Men at the top, more property, women have fewer rights. So Christian nationalism and white supremacy are both things we should be worried about. Because
I would also say Christian nationalism has absolutely nothing to do with being a Christian.
True.
The religious Christians, or they're neither. I say the right, like Christian evangelicals always talk about the Constitution and the Bible and never read either. Like,
right, completely. Because it's not about religion. It's about power, and that's probably the key word in identifying Christian nationalists. Because freedom of religion means everybody gets to choose their own religion. It does not mean one person's religion has to be our religion. And the distinction. There are a lot of really good books about Christian nationalists and all of the efforts they're taken. And it could get into real Handmaid's Tale territory. That's why the loss of women's rights is so concerning.
right.
Because that's one of the things they want to do away with. And Christian nationalists and evangelicals have traditionally and historically in this country been the proponents of slavery, the proponents of segregation, the ones who did most of the lynching. Lynchings were often scheduled after church service on a Sunday, so the people would turn out. So racism and that us and them thinking we're better than the rest, or we're the chosen ones and everybody else is a sinner. All of those beliefs are tied to oppression and a lack of civil rights. And so, yes, it is not Christianity.
I like to point out, like if you ever read the Bible, then Jesus provided free education, like he taught. That was part of his ministry. He provided free healthcare. That was part of his ministry.
Yeah.
He provided free food. That was part of his ministry.
Yeah.
He said, "Pay your taxes."
Yeah.
Give to
Caesar what is Caesar's.
And he was, and what's interesting about that in particular is he told the guy asked him a question, and it was actually about, should we overthrow the government? He was with a group that wanted to overthrow Rome. And Jesus said, well, do you have a coin? The guy pulls the coin out of his pocket. Jesus says, whose picture is on the coin? He says, Caesar. And then Jesus says, render to Caesar's what is Caesar's. And his whole point was, you're using Caesar's coin. It came out of your pocket, right? So if you're going to use the stuff the government gives you, then you should pay your taxes, because that's how the government pays for those things. Totally non-Republican
exactly.
attitude, right? You go, and also Jesus was one of the poorest. He was one of the poorest.
Yeah.
They can stand the poorest, but Jesus was one of them. Like, he is the antithesis of the Republican Party. I'm just saying. And also, he never had an.
He absolutely is. He absolutely is, and he would be appalled. And if someone ever argues like what it means to be a Christian, or, oh, this isn't Christian, or that is, I like to think of it as, like if you watch a Christmas movie, what is the lesson always in every Christmas movie? It is always sacrifice or taking care of the less fortunate, the meaning, realizing the meaning of Christmas is that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Helping someone, or sacrificing yourself to help someone else. It is never, the meaning of Christmas is never to go to church every day or to convert people or any of the other traditions associated with organized religion.
Right.
Is at its essence what Christ taught us. And the one thing he told us over and over and over and over is help the less fortunate, right?
Yeah.
Feed the hungry, take care of the poor. That is the message of Christmas, Christianity, everything else. And so none of the other stuff matters. And yes, they don't see that because it's not about that. It's about power or preserving your position at the top of the hierarchy. And so those beliefs just help cement that. So, yeah.
So,
All right.
do you have anything else? So a lot of people maybe haven't heard of you. Do you want to give your Twitter
Sure.
handle?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Samuel C. Spitale. I wrote a book called How to Win the War on Truth, an illustrated guide to how mistruths are sold, why they stick, and how to reclaim reality. It is a nonfiction graphic novel from Quirk Books, so it is fully illustrated. It talks about a lot of the things we've been talking about. I also have a YouTube channel that's the same name, How to Win the War on Truth, where I do a lot of educational videos from some of the things we talk about. Like I do there's one on Project 2025, the Second Amendment, abortion rights, and all that. So feel free to check out the YouTube channel. I am also on Twitter, but I don't know for how long, and Blue Sky, and Threads under the same name, Samuel Spitale. And TikTok. TikTok, I'm under How to Win the War on Truth. So between How to Win the War on Truth and Samuel C. Spitale, you can find me on almost all social media.
And your book is available on Amazon, right?
Book is available everywhere. Target online, Walmart online, any bookseller should have it, and definitely Amazon. And on my webpage, samuelcspitale.com, I think I still have a link at the bottom where you can order a signed copy from something I did with a promotional thing a while back. So check that out, if you want a signed copy.
Excellent.
But otherwise, you can find it almost anywhere.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on, and you've given a lot of food for thought. And I just hope we don't all give up. I know that we want to give up, but I think we just need to figure out how to penetrate and have the real conversations. I think we also need to have more conversations about how to handle like a media that is committed to just spewing mistruth. I have some other guests that are going to come on and talk about how we can handle some of those things. But I think that at the heart of it, that won't matter if we don't know how to have the conversations with people. So thanks a lot for coming on and helping us with that.
Yep. And check out, we mentioned earlier and we posted Smart Politics. Join smart.org, because they do these run-throughs of how to have conversations, the difficult conversations with people about this stuff. So.
Fantastic. Yeah. I posted the link to that on the YouTube channel. I'm going to post it on the Twitter feed once we get off too. So, all right. Thanks a lot, Samuel.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. All right. Bye-bye.